Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about the 1974 science fiction film Dark Star. This film was directed by John Carpenter. It was written by Dan O'Bannon. Carpenter also did the music as well. And this movie was a real collaboration between Carpenter and O'Bannon and other students. This film was made when they were students at USC in the early 1970s. Shot over a period of 2 years, and even got a theatrical release in '75, I believe. But and there are different versions of this film. There's this DVD which came out in 2010. It has both versions. It has the 70-minute version. That was the original version. And then for the theatrical release, they added 15 minutes of additional footage. So those are the two that are available. And I also understand there's also the student film, which is shorter even. So there are different ones floating out there. I did see they did a Blu-ray release of this a few years after. This was 2010. I think in 12 they did a Blu-ray, and that one did not include both versions. So I'm glad I have the DVD version of this. So, Dark Star, it was made on a micro budget, made by students at USC. Scrounging money around, using what resources they had to make this space movie. And basically, the movie is about a crew of 5 guys in space who are out there. Their job is to destroy planets that are possibly disrupting other planets in the system, planets that are considered ready for colonialization. So that's their job. They don't have a lot to do, these 5 guys. They're out there in space for God knows how long. They're bored. There's a lot of existential questioning about what they're doing and things like that. As many have pointed out about this film, I know I mentioned John Kenneth Muir a lot, who's really written a lot on 70s science fiction, wrote about this film as an early example of slacker cinema, where just having young people at a job who are bored and resentful of their job. That was more of a Gen X thing, where we would get with Kevin Smith movies like Clerk, or the Richard Linklater film called Slacker, which is about ennui and listlessness among Gen X. So this movie definitely taps into that, and I really like the look of the movie. It does have a distinct look, has a nice homemade quality to it, but there are some shots that are quite nice and quite wonderful. The use of colors is great. The sound design is really, really good. Similar to THX 1138, which came out a few years before Dark Star. And Lucas, also a USC student, but he was a little bit older than these guys. But the look of it, the sound, as I mentioned, the sound design's great. The music by Carpenter, kind of this synthesizer electronic score, which he would become very well known for later in his career. I like the DVD says the 36 and a half year anniversary, which is funny. So the characters, on each character kind of has a little personality on the ship as well. Dan O'Bannon is probably who kind of is the main character in some ways, plays Pinback, who is this kind of guy. He's giving everyone a hard time. He's always complaining. He's always angry about something. And then there's Doolittle and some of the other characters in the film as well. So there's a lot of philosophical discussions they have, a lot of kind of discussions about their boredom, about what they're even there for, and things like that. Tolby is another character, and things like that. There's really not a big story per se. Like there's a part where a they have to fight off an alien, or Pinback has to fight an alien, which is basically a beach ball with feet. And this sequence goes on for a while where he has to compete with this pesky little alien that's aboard the ship. And like I said, interesting stuff. Kind of almost doing it. The sequence is almost like something like a Buster Keaton type thing where he has to do a lot of physical stuff to fight with this alien. And then they run into some mechanical problems later in the film where they can't drop their bombs and the ship ends up malfunctioning. And they don't have a captain either. Their captain died in an accident. Well, in quotation marks, died. He's actually kind of alive yet in this crypto freezer. He's sort of alive and is able to talk to them, which is kind of funny. He's considered dead, but they can still communicate with him. But a lot of humor, a lot of absurdist humor. Some have compared this. Well, there's been many comparisons. Like Waiting for Godot is one comparison where it's about these 5 characters who are just waiting for something that will probably never come. They're just going to keep doing this job over and over again for people they don't know at the behest of powerful people they'll never know the reason for. So there is that absurdism to it as well. At one point there's a conversation with the bomb itself, and which is kind of funny and things like that. And many also look at this film as a parody of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it's really flipping it, where in 2001 you have this really antiseptic view of the future where everything is kind of perfect, and this is a very different type of future where the ship is always breaking down, and the crew, like even like a Forbidden Planet, where the crew in that movie is all these men in excellent shape, and women, everyone just looks perfect, and and these guys are hippies and slackers, and they're just a bunch of knuckleheads in space, just kind of doing their job. So it is funny on that level as far as how it is satirizing the overly revered tone of 2001, or I should say like this very uplifting tone of 2001, and this is really the opposite of that, which is good too. And of course Dan O'Bannon would go on to write Alien, and go on to make Return of the Living Dead, and become a writer and a real figure in genre, horror, sci-fi genre. And you can almost watch this movie as well as like an early draft of Alien, where you do have this ridiculous pest. It's more of a pest they have aboard the ship that they have to stop. It doesn't pose a threat to the crew necessarily. And the whole idea of space truckers, the idea of space will just be a place where working people are doing their jobs, hard jobs, everyday jobs, and it's really not much different than life here on Earth. So you can definitely see this as an early draft of Alien, and I think even O'Bannon said, I read, where he noticed nobody was laughing at the alien sequence in this movie. He's like, well, if I can't make them laugh, I'll try to scare them. So we get Alien. So yeah, an important movie as far as what it implied for the future of the genre, and Carpenter as well. And he wrote about the anti-authoritarian, absurdist tone in this movie is very John Carpenter, and this sense of the male characters who are resentful of authority and are always being put upon by the powers that be. So there is that Carpenter little bit of cynicism running through the film as well. So I guess you can debate like which of this movie is more O'Bannon or more Carpenter. I guess it's you have both sensibilities in this movie as well. Of course, they would never work together again, and there's a long making of feature that was also made for this DVD called Let There Be Light: The Odyssey of Dark Star, which talks about how their relationship kind of fell apart at the end of this movie. Of course, they worked together for a long time, and you have both with big ideas, big egos, and it wasn't meant to last, but they did come together for this film. I know Carpenter's stature has just skyrocketed in the past 10-15 years, and Dark Star is really not talked about a lot with Carpenter. There's The Thing is comes up a lot, and of course Halloween, and even anything he did in the 80s and even into the early 90s is, he had this incredible run of movies that I guess you could say began with Dark Star. Of course, Assault on Precinct 13 would be his first proper film he made by himself in a few years later. But yeah, Dark Star. I mean, it's a another great example of 70s science fiction made on a really low budget, but a lot of creativity, a lot of humor, irreverent humor throughout this, and an influential movie as well on ideas about the workplace and all that. So yeah, that's Dark Star. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.